Hey, Chicago. What do you say? Cubs gonna win today.
Exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's alive.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. It's time for the Baseball Podcast with National Baseball writer David Brown. David, how are you?
Andy, I've already got a frog in my throat, so I'm fine. How are you?
Like me, I think
I do like you, yes.
are choked up about the end of the Angel Hernandez era.
That's true.
In Major League Baseball. So for those people out there who don't know, which I can't imagine is anybody, he is retired as a Major League Baseball umpire. He had not worked a game since May 9th.
My birthday.
While he and Major League Baseball worked out a, what did they call it? An agreement, but basically it's a settlement.
Yeah.
And his lawyer, Kevin Murphy, said Angel was not forced out of baseball.
I would call it at least an escort. He was escorted out.
They didn't shove him out the door, but they held the door open and
they definitely held the door open.
Kind of, they just kind of waved at the door,
Propped
hey.
it open with some cash.
On Chicago sports radio station yesterday, Joe West said that Angel got a raw deal from fans because before all this technology, he was a really good umpire. I just love the fact that before proof that he was a bad umpire, he was supposedly a good umpire.
Well, and I think anybody who... I'll say this. I did see, and maybe it was related to Joe West's appearance, I saw some statistics somewhere that showed that he actually wasn't that bad, on the overall. However, he was among the worst at egregiously wrong stuff. And it was hypothesized that he kind of did that on purpose to antagonize people that he didn't like or, ump show or whatever. So I don't know if that's true. But, the calls that he missed tended to be doozies.
Yeah.
Like that Eric Gregg business in the playoff game with the Marlins.
Yeah.
Levon Hernandez years ago. So, I can buy that. So I guess I'll half buy what Joe West said, but, when Angel was bad, he was the worst.
Yeah. What would Joe know about somebody being an antagonist?
Only Nixon could go to China. So
I would say if you're right, and I have no reason to believe you're not, then what kind of hope do C.B. Buckner and Laz Diaz have? Because they're just bad.
Right. I don't think they're their cases are made any better by the technology.
Yeah.
And I remember before the technology, people were complaining about all these guys. So it's not like, when was the Steve McMichael business?
2002.
So
no,
that's
you're right. 2001. Yep.
Yeah. So and that wasn't necessarily balls and strikes, but that sort of shows you that what that does prove, I guess, is that Angel had a reputation for being horse shit, long before, they semi-perfected the strike zone box. So that ain't it, Joe West.
The strike zone box I find amusing, given that. So the rule book strike zone is supposedly the bottom of the letters, which is ambiguous because not every jersey has letters on it, to the knees, but it's almost always drawn just barely above the waist to the knees is where the real strike zone is. But on everybody's favorite Cub, Nick Madrigal, it's below his waist. It's the tiniest little box. And so he'll strike out on a ball that's like, a few inches above where the thing is, and Boog will just be, apoplectic. Oh, what a terrible call. It's like, Boog, the thing was literally middle. Just because Marquee draws the tiny little box, that doesn't actually make it the strike zone. I know there are teams who take issue with, and they're not going to publicly say because they don't really care, but they'll tell people the one you see on TV is way too variable to be like. Fans get really upset about borderline calls, and on the one you see on TV, and they're like, we would have had that as a strike. We don't think he blew that. Yeah, we would have had a strike on our little imaginary box.
Now, I know that they have taken out the box on the devices in the dugout that the players can look at in between the bats so they don't complain to the umpires. I think the umpires said, hey, this is not right or fair. My question is, why can't we have a universal box? Is that impossible to get, where it's the right box? Is such a thing?
I think basically every regional broadcasting uses that same system. So I think the TV one we see is like the strike zone you would see tonight on Marquee is the same one you're going to see on like Bally Sports Midwest.
Yeah.
But I guess what these people were saying is the one, like the commercial version, is different than the version that the teams claim that they use.
Right.
But it's really a different system. They're not putting it on, theirs is just all getting fed into their big brain computer, and it's telling them, how many, what percent got missed. And I don't even know if the networks use different ones anymore. It doesn't seem like you should. I mean, once you install all the crap in all the parks, shouldn't just everybody use the same ones?
What about these websites, the Empire, MLB Umpire Auditor and things like that? They must have a box somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if they're not using the TV copy, I don't think. That's a good question. I should ask one of them. Where do you getting that box? Did you go out down some back alley and you bought the box from somebody? Fell off a truck. This fell off the Orioles truck. Don't ask where I got it. This is yours now.
I'm not sure. I probably could have looked this up. Like the last time Angel worked the playoffs and how often he worked the playoffs. For a guy that everybody but Joe West thought wasn't that good, and who sued Major League Baseball, and it seemed like they've kind of been trying to get rid of him for a few years. They kept giving him.
Yeah.
You always saw him in the playoffs at some point.
Yeah, at least
I guess that didn't matter.
In the wild card round. Maybe he was always there to doom the Brewers. Maybe that was his job.
Maybe.
You make sure, Angel, just make sure the Brewers go home in 3 days. We don't want them screwing up our TV ratings. So it's a possibility. It's entirely possible that whoever ends up being the Angel Hernandez replacement is just as bad. But he won't have the stench of 30 years of everyone saying you suck.
Right.
Cloaked over him. Stench? You don't get cloaked with stench. mixing my metaphors.
It does seem like most of the time when I've noticed an umpire not having a good game, it's somebody wearing triple digits, one of the new guys anyway. So, I mean, that's a good point. Who are you going to get to replace him kind of a thing. It's kind of like running for president.
Now, the other night, the other day, in Memorial Day in Milwaukee, Laz Diaz did a funny. Craig Counsell was coming out of the Cub dugout to present the lineup card to his old bench coach, Pat Murphy. And he was getting booed lustily by his former fans. And Laz went over and put his arm around him so that people would just assume they were booing the umpire. Which I actually thought was kind of funny.
That's great.
And then he went out and blew 11 calls in the top of the first. And I mean, there was some funny stuff. There were more than one fan. It was not an original idea, though. There was more than one fan who took signs to that game that said, "We will never forget you, Greg," which I thought was really funny. But they're continuing to boo. They were on. They did it again last night, and it's like, okay, you get to boo him the first time. We'll give you that. But I posited that he's the best two-legged manager in Brewers history.
Oh my God.
Well, Harvey only had one. He wasn't hiding that fact. He's the only guy who took him to a World Series, so I think he was a little. You could say by that basis he was the best. Yeah. A former player, we heard a million times he's from Whitefish Bay because that's all anybody seems to be the only biographical thing. And he went to Notre Dame. The only things people can remember about Craig. The Cub fans, we had a real reason to dislike Dusty. And I don't think I think people got tired of booing Dusty the first inning of his first game back with the Reds. That was kind of moving.
Is it just because it's the Cubs?
I think it's just the general insecurity of, oh my God, you left us and you left us to go to the Cubs. If he'd gone anywhere else, they probably wouldn't have cared. But the Brewers, and especially their fans, fancy the Cubs to be their rival.
Right.
It's not reciprocated, but that's what they think.
The Cubs are already involved with somebody. Sorry.
Yeah, we've been stuck with the Cardinals forever. That's not going to change. It is ironic in that state, though, that I think that there are a lot of Packer fans who now consider the Vikings to be a bigger rival than the Bears.
Yeah.
Just considering that the Bears never beat them. And after a while, you just kind of wow, are we really that big a rival with them?
Right.
I guess so. While we're kind of talking about the Cubs, so we'll transition to this. So the Cubs are back above 500 with their win last night, I believe. You got to remember that. Yes, making them one of only. It's still five teams in the National League that have winning records.
That's not many.
But they are teetering. They have not been good for quite a while. And I don't typically read power rankings, but I just wanted to see how far they had slid in the Athletic one. And I think they were down to 12th maybe in all of baseball. But Andy McCullough had a stat because he was writing it up. Let me know if you think this is good or bad. Cubs hitters have the lowest line drive rate in Major League Baseball.
Ooh. That's not good.
No, I didn't think that was good. And that passes the eye test when you watch them. There's not a lot of good happening on offense with the Cubs.
Now, do home runs different than line drives?
Yeah, I believe you can. Not every home run is a line drive. I think there are. I don't know that. I guess you could hit a ground ball home run. You'd have to do a lot of running.
Well, as opposed to.
But some can be fly balls, I would guess. There must be some kind of launch angle.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm getting at.
Really
they make up for it with taller home runs that don't count as line drives somehow.
Yeah, I can tell you from watching them every day, that's not happening.
Okay.
There is not a lot of, ooh, that ball was crushed way too high to help their line drive rate.
Right.
That's too bad. No.
I'm just trying to see the positive side, maybe.
Michael Busch had a home run last night, and everybody was kind of like, holy shit, they had a home run. It's been 6 games since they hit one.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
That is sort of unlike the Cubs. Although, Wrigley can play like a pitcher's park when the wind is right. But
I know offense is down around baseball.
Yeah.
And this was illustrated in a way that I didn't even think of. We were on the Cub podcast last week. We were talking about Cody Bellinger and whether or not we think he's on the route to a good enough season to opt out.
Yeah.
And he's hitting about 40 points worse than last year. His on-base average is down like 20 points. His slugging is down like 15 points. But at the time, his OPS plus a year ago was 133, and his OPS plus this year was 132.
Mm-hmm.
So that varies. That brings in the entire league because it's above or below average.
Right.
Which is a good illustration that a guy having a worse year basically had the same OPS plus because everybody was having a slightly worse year.
He's in position where, a hot streak or whatever gets him to where he finished last year.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know is he still going to opt out? Maybe, but he could very easily get to where he was last year from where he is now. So there's plenty of time for that.
Well, he missed 3 weeks, so he didn't have a lot of at bats. So actually, after we talked about that, the next time I checked, he was OPS plus at 115. He dropped even farther. It's like, Cody, turn around. But yeah, that was illustrated with Ian Happ, who a couple of days ago slugging was 302. He had 2 homers on Sunday night in St. Louis, and it was 364.
Right.
So things can change quite a bit. The other talking point with the Cubs right now is last night, Ben Brown, their young right-hander.
No relation.
That's right, your nephew. Had a no-hitter going into the 8th inning and thrown 93 pitches, and he was taken out for another young pitcher, Hayden Wesneski. And there were some Cub fans who were very upset that they didn't get a chance to witness history because Ben Brown didn't get a shot to throw his no-hitter. I'll just say I didn't even think about it when he got taken out. To me, it made perfect sense because he is not in the rotation all the time.
Yeah.
He's swinging between the bullpen and the rotation. And so the idea that you were going to push him much past 100 pitches was you weren't going to do it. And he had 93 going into the 8th, which means unless he has manages to get 6 outs on 7 pitches, probably not going to finish that game anyway. You might as well take him out right then. The other thing was with he struck out the last guy he faced, but he looked a little gassed in the 7th. And the aforementioned Cody Bellinger climbed up the center field wall to make an incredible catch to rob a home run to keep the Cubs in the lead. But there were still fans. Now, from my standpoint, Hayden Wesneski did the best thing possible when he came in, and that was he immediately gave up a hit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe we've talked about it on this podcast. The last time the Cubs threw a combined no-hitter was in 2021 in Dodger Stadium. They then went on to lose 10 of their next 11 games. And not only did the season fall apart, but that was the last gasp of the World Series team. It was all then sold off for parts. And I blame it on that combined no-hitter. I think Ryan Tepera might have started, or at least I know he pitched a bunch of it in the middle.
Yeah, didn't start it, but I remember Kimbrel ended it and was surprised that it was a no-hitter.
Yep, didn't know a no-hitter.
Well, the one thing I heard was it wasn't so much that it was a no-hitter, but it's like you're going to trust a 1-0 lead to this bullpen? So, I mean, from that standpoint, maybe that could have been like a half joke, but
yeah. Well, I can understand why Cub fans don't understand it. It's not like the Cubs have a history of young top pitching prospects whose careers are shortened or ruined by overuse.
Right.
I can't think of any examples of that.
I'm not drawing a blank, but I'm drawing a white towel.
Yes. That would be fun. That's what the Cubs should do today. Today, Ben Brown should be in the bullpen doing the towel drill. Look, see, we're on top of this. This is going to be fine. But it's kind of the other side. We had this discussion 2 weeks ago about Paul Skeens. And at that one, people are going to be like, we were just 2 weeks ago. You talked about they're babying these guys too much. But I thought our whole thing then was it was kind of specific to Skeens, as he had been a guy who in college had been trained to go deep into games.
Right.
And the Pirates were artificially shortening his stints with the idea, I think, that they'll get more out of him once they call him up. That's different than taking a guy who's pitching for you in a pretty important role, either coming out of the bullpen or starting, and just pushing him past 100 pitches because he might do something that's a statistical oddity that's cool.
I think I sympathize with the old heads who miss going for the no-hitter and that kind of thing. I think that's fun and not an unimportant part of baseball in its own way. But I think it's also unwise, like you said, to just kind of drop everything you're doing and push a guy to throw 120 pitches to get a no-hitter when you're never doing that in the first. You're not pushing him in the first place to do anything like that. It's just not smart. I mean, if we're gonna, have a discussion about what's good for pitchers and what's not, I think you could have one that says maybe they shouldn't throw as hard, and maybe they could throw a little bit longer if they didn't try to max out all the time, from the first pitch of the game. Justin Verlander's talked about this, where, I kind of built my way up to 97 and 98 miles an hour and was throwing harder later in the game because I wasn't necessarily throwing hard. There are things you can do. Just all of a sudden going from, all right, Ben Brown swing man to Ben Brown, Mark Pryor, Kerry Wood, 2003 or whatever is dumb too. So I sympathize with the problem, but the solution was not pushing Ben Brown to try a no-hitter.
Now, one thing that would have been cool, our old friend Kevin Kadick pointed this out, and I had forgotten it, but then I knew this was a thing. Now, the Brewers have never thrown a no-hitter in that park, in Miller Park, American Family, whatever. Had Ben thrown one, it would have been the third Cub no-hitter there. The Cubs have already thrown more no-hitters as the home team in Miller Park than the Brewers, because Carlos Zambrano's no-hitter against the Astros, the Cubs were the home. Were they? No, that's not right. They weren't the home team. Houston was the home team, so that's not true. But they've thrown two. And then, of course, Alec Mills. Who could forget? Alec Mills no-hit the Brewers.
Maybe this is why Craig Counsell gets booed. Specifically these reasons.
It could be.
These carpetbaggers from the South.
I was just glad. Of course, and then what you said, if fans were freaking out about the lead, the Cubs did manage to blow the lead in the ninth. Hector Neris got the first two out. Then he walked a guy. Then he balked him to second. Hector does one of those weird little shimmies when he gets to his stretch. And he does pause, but he's been warned that because he's still moving, he needs to pause longer. And Jim DeShays was even worried about it on the broadcast. He was like, Hector could get called for, there's always the risk of Hector being called for a balk. And then 5 seconds later, Hector was called for a balk. And the assistant pitching coach got thrown out between innings because he went down and watched the video and then started screaming at the third base ump, said that Hector had paused. But it was all fine because the Cub offense broke out in the 10th. And they broke their 5-game losing streak. So I want to tell you a story about how Ronald Acuna Jr., not senior, he's fine. Ronald Acuna Jr. Has now blown out his left ACL. He's He took out the right a couple of years ago. Now he's on to the left. And I think it's my fault. Now, the reason I think it's my fault is I'm not a big vibes person, but through no fault of his own, I have been, and maybe not even consciously myself, although I did know I was doing it, but I wasn't doing it on purpose. I was putting out bad vibes for Ronald Acuna because in the Discipio Fantasy League, in our draft this year, as you know, we have a keeper league where you can keep as many players as you want, and we do a draft every year. And so if you picked a guy, the tax you pay to keep a guy is 2 rounds in the draft. So if you pick a guy in the 6th round, you can keep him the next year, but he's your 4th round draft pick. And because of that, nobody gets protected for the 1st or 2nd round because you can't. You can't go up 2 rounds from 1 or 2. So eventually all the best players end up back being eligible to be drafted because you just can't keep them long enough. And because I had a lousy year the year before, I was picking 3rd. And so I was looking at the list of guys who might be available, and I saw that, Acuna was going to be available, Mookie Betts was going to be available. I'm like, well, those 2 guys are going to be gone, so now I got to figure out who I'm going to pick 3rd. And based on the other guys I was keeping, I decided I was going to draft Jose Ramirez. That was the guy I was going to take, number 3 overall. So we get ready, the draft starts, we draft on Yahoo, and I see the guy picking 1st, and then the guy picking 2nd has a little icon next to the 2, and it's these 2 little arrows making like a circle, if you can picture it, almost like a roundabout. And I'm like, oh, that guy must not be here. That's like the auto draft symbol. So now I'm looking at the list. I'm like, well, if the guy picking 2 is auto draft, there's no way I'm getting Acuna. If he doesn't go 1, he's going to go 2. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take Jose. What I didn't pay attention to was the guy picking 2nd was brand new to the league. He had taken over a team somebody else had. And I know this is the Discipio League, and I wasn't even in it the first few years. My own readers created it without me and finally let me in. And my first year was a disaster. I kept guys I shouldn't have kept. I was overvaluing guys. So I should have been on high alert. This is a new guy. He might screw something up. Pay attention. But I see right away, first pick is Mookie Betts off the board. And then immediately I'm up. So I was like, oh, obviously Acuna's gone. So I draft Jose Ramirez. Next pick comes up, Ronald Acuna Jr.
What?
And I'm like, shit, he didn't go. So I looked. The guy picking 2nd had kept Randy Arozarena, who had been the 3rd round pick the year before of the team he inherited. So that was his number 1 pick.
Oh.
Objectively terrible decision, and Randy's not having a good year, and it's even worse. But through my own, that's not his fault. That's my fault, right? I wasn't observant. I was assuming, and you know what happens when you assume. So from that moment, it ruined the rest of the draft for me. I just kept sitting there going, I just gave up 70 stolen bases and 40 home runs. I like Jose. He's fine. He just happens to be leading the American League in home runs and RBIs right now. But the whole rest of the draft, I'm like, oh, shit. It really cast a pall over it. And then Ronald got off to kind of a slow start. And I was like, oh. And he got hurt in spring training, right after that. I'm like, well, maybe I'm not so dumb. I feel like I was putting this, bad energy out for Ronald. And I apologize that he blew out his knee, because I think it's my fault. So you
feel like you put kind of like a fantasy voodoo hex on it?
Yes, I did. I didn't mean to do it. So I'm sorry, Ronald. But I'm in 2nd place with Jose Ramirez. So
it's going to work out, despite
so far,
yourself.
Yeah. But speaking of the Barbs, what do you do when your best player gets injured before Memorial Day or on Memorial Day, whenever it went down? They are currently going to have journeyman Adam Duvall play right field for them most of the time. So I looked it up to see, the Braves have had a really good farm system. What have they got coming up? Well, their ninth, according to MLB.com, their 9th top prospect is a guy named Luis Guanipa. He's in rookie ball. And their number 16 top prospect is Douglas Glad, and he's also in rookie ball. And those are the only 2 outfielders on their list. So they will not be promoting from within.
No. They just called up their number 5 prospect, a pitcher, who was like Rule 5 eligible. So it's really kind of a strange farm system now. It's not like it was. That gravy train wasn't going to go on forever.
Yeah. Well, they're all. You can't feel too bad for them. They've stocked their entire team with their own guys.
They won the World Series without Acuna 3 years ago. So it's not exactly the same situation, but they don't have, now they don't have Strider. So I don't know. And they weren't playing that well, like you said. Acuna wasn't playing that well, and they weren't. This is all relatively speaking. Yep. Philadelphia's been, until very recently, the hot shorts of the league. But they still, Alex Anthopoulos, whether it's taking on salary or whatever, they'll be in a position to. If you want to go cheap, you can add Tommy Pham. If you want to go expensive, you can add somebody else. So they'll find somebody. I don't think they'll ride with Duvall.
Well, and you're right. They had to replace their entire outfield in that World Series year. Jorge Soler and Duvall, Eddie Rosario.
Yeah, him too. They might have added 4 guys.
Yeah,
they might have added 3 in
Jack
a year.
Peterson.
Yes,
from the Cubs. And I think that was their NLCS MVP and their World Series MVP. Were guys they picked up when they made the Jack trade, they weren't even sure they were going to the playoffs.
Right.
They made a big run. So yeah, we won't feel too bad for them. They have Jared Kelenic in left field. I saw somebody say, well, maybe they could move Marcell Ozuna back to the outfield. I don't think they're going to do that. But if they did, that would open DH and they could make a deal with the Cubs for Nick Madrigal.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, Andy.
Yeah, you're right. The Cubs wouldn't do that. You're right.
Yes. He was a number 4 pick. We can't.
I thought that there was a thing on The Athletic. Ken Rosenthal was writing about the struggles of the Dodgers, which I thought was kind of funny, considering the Dodgers have a almost 6-game lead in the National League West. They were really struggling, but he was making the case that even with spending $1.4 billion this offseason, they have holes, and we talked about it. Like they built a roster, didn't have a shortstop,
right?
And basically saying they still got a lot of work to do and a lot of moves to make. And then that brought me on Memorial Day. I was watching MLB Network, and Brian Kenny on his little panel show had Bob Costas and Chris Mad Dog Russo. Because if you want serious baseball chat, you get Mad Dog, who is far more comfortable talking about Don Newcomb than he is talking about any current player. But the question that Brian posed to them was about the Dodgers, and it was, should Shohei give up trying to pitch and just become a right fielder full-time?
Well, I guess it's occurred to everybody at some point, like right after he gets hurt. That's a good thing to consider. It's more fun. But it's more fun to have him do the other things. He doesn't really want to do that.
No.
So, why force him to? And it's funny how, he'll get hurt and he won't be able to pitch. And then, he becomes like extra special in some form, or, he breaks some kind of record, or some kind of metric as a hitter that he wasn't doing before. And so I think I can't see how that's true. I think, if you have a guy that can do both things, then you let him do both.
And to their credit, both Costas and Russo said, no, he shouldn't give it up.
Yeah.
But Russo's thing was weird. So shocking.
I can't believe that.
He was like, maybe they just don't pitch him till the playoffs. It's like, okay, that'll work, right? That was like, I remember as a kid watching the Bears, I couldn't understand why. Just save Jim McMahon for the playoffs. You
mean like next year do this?
Yes.
Is that what they mean?
Like next year he'd still be, well, I think, I believe Kenny, he didn't, because of the two the two bigger stars started talking before he could completely explain it. I assume what he was going to was A, Shohei probably would be a very good defensive outfielder. B, the Dodgers have their DH spot locked in with him, and they're not as flexible. And they don't have a right fielder. Jason Hayward has been terrible this year, and Mookie has had to play shortstop or second base. And I think if he'd had time to explain it, the whole idea was going to be you'd get extra value from Shohei actually being in the field. He's also, like, for 6'4", he's ridiculously fast. Yeah. And, there's all that stuff. But yeah, Russo was like, no, just save him for the playoffs and then pitch then. It's like, well, that's a great time to make your first appearance in 2 years. Is come out of the bullpen in the playoffs. But you made a good point. Now, he's been hurt twice as a pitcher. Both times he's been able to still bat.
Yeah.
So this idea that if he gets hurt as a pitcher, you lose him. So far, you haven't. He just goes to hitting. Now, last year he pitched until he got hurt, and it didn't hurt his offense. He batted .304 with a .412 on base, a .654 slugs for a .1066 OPS. This year, DHing exclusively, he's been great. He's hitting .336, .403, .621. That's a .1024 OPS. His OPS was actually higher last year while he was still pitching. So it doesn't seem to affect his offense at all.
No, if he does slump at one of the things for whatever reason, he seems to come back the next year refined and better than ever at the thing that he wasn't quite as good at the year before. So, I mean, it's too fun and interesting of an experiment to give up.
Yeah,
we're too far along. At some point, maybe there's diminishing returns.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about this before. When he's back healthy enough to pitch, he can't do this forever.
Right.
He's going to have to pick one or the other. But there's no way in hell you should cut him short when he's 27 or whatever he is. This is when it's going to happen. I think the other thing Kenny was trying to get at was when you pitch him, you have to give him extra rest, which screws up your rotation. But the Dodgers have so many, their best pitchers all have injury concerns.
Yeah.
That they really probably should build a 6-man rotation.
And
because they all need extra rest.
They're a team with the resources. Maybe you could say that some teams can't or won't put resources into a 6-man rotation. The Dodgers can and should.
Yeah, because Buehler is going to need extra rest.
Yeah.
Glasnow could certainly use extra rest. Shohei's going to need it. It's not like he's the one guy who's screwing the rotation up for everybody else.
Right.
They actually all benefit by it if the Dodgers go that way. So. And as far as his rehab, I saw this stat. He has started throwing from 60 feet 6 inches, and he's throwing 80 miles an hour. And I thought, just like Kyle Hendricks.
Right. Well, maybe Mad Dog will get his wish, and he'll pitch in the playoffs this year.
Maybe. So the I guess effective today. Right, the Negro League statistics now count, which makes is Josh Gibson. What is he the leader in now?
Yeah, I just saw this. I know it was my suggestion to talk about it.
It's bad. I could
WRC or the thing that's better than OPS that Fangraphs uses, weighted runs created adjusted plus. So like that all-encompassing stat that's kind of like OPS. So it takes all the stuff that they do, but it's only like this is a very. I don't know that this is a mistake. Like just the idea of doing it is wrong, but I think the execution's wrong a little bit, and they didn't quite think of everything as far as the meanings and unintended consequences of the whole history of not allowing black players to play in the first place. I think the statistical part of it doesn't matter as much to me anyway, because I'm of the opinion, and I think everybody should be of the same opinion, that all the white player statistics are already tainted anyway. Yeah. Babe Ruth stats, everybody up until integration and even after, to a certain extent, their stats are not as good as they would have been had everybody been allowed to play at the same time.
Right.
So it's not like you're bringing in these Negro League stats that are going to mess up anything. It's the major league stats are already tainted.
Yeah.
Because of exclusion, because of the institutional racism of the time. So that doesn't matter so much. But it is. I've seen a couple people make a good point that it's almost, maybe it's subconscious. I don't know that it's on purpose, but it's like a whitewashing, if you will, choice of words, of Major League Baseball history. That it almost looks like, when you look at the statistics, like black people were always allowed to play.
Right.
And it's a complicated thing, because it's like Josh Gibson doesn't really need all this to be a major leaguer, like small, not capital Major League Baseball, but like to be one of the best ever. He doesn't really need this authentication by Major League Baseball. He already was this. And in a way, F you didn't let me play in the first place. And now you're saying my statistics are good, and it's if I was there all along. And I think, one of the reasons Josh Gibson has died before he was 40 years old had something to do with not being able to play Major League Baseball and being kept out. And
he died of a stroke at 35
yeah,
while he was still playing.
It's not a coincidence that he did. It's got something to do with what it was like to be a black person in those days. And Major League Baseball is partially responsible for that. So for in a way, it's like, get out of here with this.
Yeah, you've got we always did. You have two sets of stats without any way of equating the two. They're both lacking context. But like you said, now if the idea is no, they're all together, then it's almost like you're trying to avoid the question from now on. Then, Josh Gibson batted 373 and had a higher slugging percentage in his career than Babe Ruth. It's probably better to then have to follow up with the question. It's like, well, why does Babe Ruth, the all-time leader in Major League Baseball in slugging? That's because Josh didn't get to play in the major leagues.
Right.
But if you mush the two together, you're going to get to a time where somebody's just going to see the list and assume that he played in the major leagues, which he didn't.
And it's one of the things that makes Jackie Robinson so important is that for 80 years before that, he wouldn't have been allowed to play. It's not just that he showed up one day. It's that he was excluded on purpose, and that was wrong. And that's, it should be about everybody getting a chance to play. It's just, I don't know. You have to handle it sensitively, with a sensitivity, and I don't think they're trying to ham-hand it, but it's just they're missing some context and messing it up, and it just leaves me kind of all the wrong way.
Yeah, and I don't know what to me, it was great when they added them to the database because it's nice to be able to look them up. But I don't know what the impetus was now that they're just going to commingle them without the context.
The part of it that that I don't mind is that, but they already kind of did this, is that acknowledging that the Negro Leagues were a major league, were as legitimate as what was going on in Major League Baseball at the time. I get it from that standpoint, but they kind of already did that. I thought. I know they did. A few years ago, they made an announcement. Well, the Negro Leagues were a major league. It wasn't so much that they were Major League Baseball, but it was an acknowledgement, a long overdue one, that those guys played the game at the highest possible level that they were allowed to. I thought MLB already made that point, but.
No, I agree. Another question I want to ask you was, they have the best record. Are the Phillies the best team in baseball?
Yeah, you ask, and as we speak, they've hit a slump, which is
for the first time all year, they've lost 3 in a row.
3. I mean, that's not really even that bad. But no. The Royals hadn't had a losing streak longer than 3, I think, until now. So
the Cubs had until a couple of weeks ago when they started this big
I would
slump.
say, subject to change. The Dodgers doing something, or I'm not like a huge. I mean, the Yankees are fine; they have holes. But if you look at Phillies' starting rotation, if you look at some of the guys that they have in their lineup, from top to bottom, they have some holes and some places that are not producing. But Castellanos is not any good, but Bryce Harper's up there among the best players in the league, 5 or 6 best. They haven't had Trey Turner. That's pretty impressive that they haven't had Turner for much of this.
And especially he got off to such a great start. It's not like the Acuna thing where you lost a guy who wasn't playing well.
Right.
He was playing exceptionally well and he got hurt, and they just keep going.
And they have a pretty decent bullpen. So I think this is legit, and I would say they're the best team. Maybe not by a lot, but by something.
Yeah, they have a very odd outfield.
Yeah.
The fact that Castellanos plays every day in the outfield is bad enough, but he plays right. He might be the worst outfielder in baseball. I mean, I remember when the Cubs traded for him, and that thing was, "Ooh, don't put him in right field." And it's like, how bad could he be? Like, oh my God, he could be that bad. But now he's also not hitting. On top of it, he's hitting 199 with his OPS is 572. They don't really have a center fielder. They go between Johan Rojas and Christian Pache, and then Brandon Marsh, who is fine in left field. Why is he always wet?
He does that on purpose.
Yeah, I know he does.
It looks like he's a drowned rat or something. But it's one of those things that I'm not sure that he knows. He's got to do the Dan Haggerty beard, and he's got to dunk himself in the water, and I don't think I've been around him, and he doesn't smell bad, so it doesn't extend itself to that. It's not like he's got bad hygiene.
Yeah,
he just looks like the FBI is going to knock on his door pretty soon and raid his compound.
But yeah, they've got, obviously they have Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, but they're not even their best pitcher this year. Ranger Suarez is unbelievable. And Christopher Sanchez has been really good.
Christopher. Yeah, that's as good a starting pitching as you're going to find. The back of the bullpen's pretty good. And once they get Trey Turner back, maybe that will. I don't know. Somehow, can that get Nick Castellanos off the field? I don't know. And the funny thing about Nick Castellanos is he's gotten better in the outfield. He's not good by any means, but he has gotten better, and he's still bad. It's all accentuated because his OPS is under 600.
Yeah, but no matter how bad he gets, his confidence never wanes.
Right.
I was watching him last night. I was watching him play the Giants, and I was trying to think of the playoff game last year. I think it was against the Diamondbacks, where he chased a ball into foul territory, and everybody on the Philly dugout was yelling for him to let the ball drop because he wasn't going to be able to make the throw. And he caught it, and he did this wild spin, and he gunned a guy out at home plate. And it was like, you can't catch a routine fly ball, but you could do that.
Right.
They were all like, it's one of those, like a terrible jump shot. It's no. Yeah. Oh my God. Because everybody loves him.
Yeah.
He's every teammate's favorite teammate. Although he's got competition on that team because Schwarber and Bryce. Watching them in the playoffs last year, I was like, oh, good. They have 3 of my favorite Cubs. And one of them never even was a Cub. But Schwarber and Castellanos and Bryce Harper, who wanted to be a Cub. Cubs just wouldn't pay him, so he never became one.
There were a couple places he wanted to go, and he wasn't welcome. He leads. I saw a stat with Harper that he's got more ejections by far than anybody else in a recent span of time. And Matt Carpenter is also on that list, I guess, for some reason. You wouldn't know it, but so he, like you said, people like Harper, but he's good at getting a red ass. So.
Yeah. Well, for a guy who went the entire spring without a fly ball, it has not harmed him in the regular season. He's got a 901 OPS, 13 homers, and 41 RBIs.
Right.
It's pretty good. He's also turned into a very good first baseman, which is not a shock, considering he's a good athlete, and he was a catcher, and he was a third baseman, and he was an outfielder.
Right.
They're an interesting group. I feel like the biggest thing Dave Dombrowski did to make the team better this year was he got rid of Craig Kimbrell so Rob Thompson couldn't use him as a closer. It's like, no, just don't. We'll make him go away, and then you won't be able to do it.
Well, Kimbrell, it was looking like that situation with the White Sox where he was like unusable for a while, but he pitched his way back into the end of games for the Orioles. So they moved him to like the 7th inning. I'm like, well, that's not going to work. He doesn't like that. But maybe it was the White Sox all along who were the bad thing with that. So he's back in the saddle again. So they kind of saved themselves there.
Yeah, he's had an interesting career because for like the first 10 years, he was probably the best closer in baseball.
Yeah.
And then he struggled his last year in Boston to the point where Chris Sale saved the World Series, the last game of the World Series. And then no one would sign him.
Right.
So he ended up with the Cubs. And then he struggled. And then he struggled at the beginning of the COVID season really badly at the very beginning. And because it was only a 60-game season, people didn't notice that from like game 15 on, he was awesome. Because he still ended up with an ERA over 5.
Right.
And then at 21, he was amazing for the Cubs. Just, I've read these before. I just like to, he in 39 games, 36 and 2/3 innings, gave up 13 hits, struck out 64, walked 13, had an ERA of 0.49, didn't allow a homer. No, he allowed 1. Went to the White Sox, and in 24 games, he had a 5.09 ERA and gave up 4 homers, gave up 51 hits in 60 innings. No, that was then he went to the Dodgers, and he was the setup man. And then last year got to be the closer with the Phillies, but struggled in the playoffs again. And so there were a lot of Orioles fans who were like, well, this is what we're going to, solve our temporary closer problem with. And they're going to need another guy.
They are. The Orioles probably are using their relief pitchers too much, too frequently. They have some good ones, Yennier Cano and Danny Klum and not really household names, but Cano made the All-Star team last year. They still need, and they've got starting pitchers who are hurt too. Dean Kramer, get me Dean Kramer, and John Means. So they're going to have to do a deal. You asked me before about the Phillies being the best team, and we talked about Acuna getting hurt. The Braves still have. I mean, Max Fried and Chris Sale might be the two best pitchers in the league at the moment. I mean, they're hot as heck, and Sale is amazingly kind of rounded back into form. You kind of could see that coming, but so they're still formidable in that way. The Braves could get hot again and could win the World Series again without Acuna, but they're going to need to trade for somebody for the outfield, and the Orioles over in the AL are going to need somebody, at least one, if not 2 guys for the rotation.
Yeah. I was watching them last night playing the Red Sox, and their announcers, they had 2 fill-ins, but one of them was Greg Olson. Greg Olson, is that 2 Gs or 2 Gs? Yeah, 2 Gs was the catcher.
Yeah, he's 2 Gs.
Yeah, 2 Gs. They were talking about the 9th inning, and they just assumed they were going to trade for Mason Miller.
Oh, sure.
Because they have the best farm system in baseball, and the A's are going to trade him because they're the A's.
Right.
The A's don't, there's no reason to trade him right now. They don't.
Right.
They get him for years for cheap, and they like that. And then that's still, the Orioles, obviously, they gave up real prospects to get Corbin Burns. They've got plenty. They could do it again. But I think teams tend to kind of fall in love with their prospects to their detriment. One guy who doesn't is not their GM. It's the GM of the Phillies. Dave Dombrowski would trade them all. He wouldn't care. He'd be throwing them off the back of the bus. Who wants them?
Well, a few of the Orioles, it's funny that, they've brought up, Heston Kjerstad and some other guys, and they have a guy in the minors, Kobe Mayo, who's third base, and he's on the IL right now. So these depth issues sort of enter into it too. Some of these guys that maybe they could trade, they can't right now because of injuries. So, or at least it clouds maybe what you get in return. So, and it's just, there just aren't that many trades made before July 1st. So,
yeah, I mean, they already broke the emergency glass and brought up Jackson Holiday and then sent him back.
Right.
And when they brought Kjerstad up, they didn't use him.
Right.
He got 14 at bats in 3 weeks. Just we just got him around just in case. Well, not doing him any good to have him just sitting there watching. Last thing I want to ask you about was, I think it's tomorrow. The Division III College World Series starts, and there is a college in it, Birmingham Southern, who isn't even a college. Well, actually, they are still a college until that day. They officially close their doors on the 30th, which is tomorrow, right? Yeah. And that their baseball team will play in the College World Series even after they have closed down. They ran out of money. Oh, it's May 31st, so it's Friday. And I was going to ask you this. I was hoping you didn't know, but you knew, so you can act surprised.
Okay.
He's not their best pitcher. He's their second best pitcher. Their best pitcher is a guy named John Learson, with too many E's and too many S's, who went 10-2 with a 3.97 ERA. But their other pitcher, and John is the guy who won the game in the Super Regional to get them to the College World Series. But the guy who won the game before to get them in position is their number 2 pitcher. And if baseball fans, especially Chicago baseball fans, want to feel old, it's Drake LaRoche.
He's putting
back from Thailand,
that youthful wisdom to work in college. It's amazing. So does Birmingham Southern closing have anything to do with LaRoche's dad going on a raid somewhere?
He caught the school president in a compromising position with opening the door to a shipping container. So
I think we all knew that Drake would hit it big in baseball someday when he was 12 or whatever, and basically running the White Sox, the clubhouse.
Yeah. Well, here he is. He's pitching for the. I didn't look to see what their nickname was, but they have their logo. Actually, I really like their uniforms, and their logo was cool. Maybe they spent too much of their operating funds. It's some kind of either a mountain lion or a panther. And it forms the top circle. The head forms the top circle of the B in Birmingham. It's really nice. And their uniforms, I saw the road grays because they were celebrating. Those were also very nice. So, you can at least sell those and make a little money. Very reminiscent of, he's a former Chief quarterback and a Bear quarterback, Dave Craig.
Yeah. Milton College.
Yeah, who played for years in the NFL after his college had gone out of business, Milton College in Milton, Wisconsin.
That always, it bothers me when, it's one thing for like a Wisconsin to stop playing baseball, intercollegiate baseball. I find that disappointing. And I was worried about Cal. They almost went, their baseball team almost went under. And
well, now they're in the ACC, they'll be fine.
Right. But for an entire college to go under, what are they doing wrong? I don't know if we want to know.
Well, I have a friend who played collegiate soccer at Judson University.
Yeah.
And they were an online university, and then they became a brick and mortar one, and now they're an online university again. So we'd love to give her crap about, well, yeah, you're a big soccer star at an online university.
Do they have esports teams?
They probably do now. But she was like, we were a real college. They're in Clinton, Iowa, I believe. And she said she liked this. She said one of the things she liked about the town was it smelled like dog food.
Dog food.
Dog food.
Okay.
And we're like, Abby, that's not a selling point. She's like, it's really not that bad a smell. I'm like, you don't want your whole town to smell like dog food. That was a similar, although Kevin Durant was a complaint, he claimed that Oklahoma City smelled like dog food because they also had a big dog food plant somewhere.
Mm.
So she had that in common with Kevin Durant.
I didn't notice that when I was in Oklahoma City. I noticed some other smells, but
maybe it was just where it might literally have been by their practice facility.
I see.
That he was complaining that it smelled like dog food. I remember that from a Sports Illustrated thing. With him complaining. Well, anyway, good luck to Drake LaRoche and his dad, and to all the Panthers or Mountain Lions or Kitty Cat, whatever the Birmingham Southern College is.
Right.
So if they win the College World Series, where does the trophy go?
Boy.
I mean, they already got plaques. They won a regional and a super regional. Those got to go. I guess they just go in Adam LaRoche's basement.
I don't know. Maybe there could be like a not a van. That would be weird. But like a trailer, like a
windowless van.
No, there would be
Adam
lots
would
of
like
windows.
that.
There'd be lots of windows, so you could put them in the windows. I don't know.
The Cubs should reach out and offer to put it in the utility. He'll hang it in the utility tunnel of fame.
Right. Give it a home.
And then they have a windowless van for Clark. They literally do. He has the Clark, like the van that if you book Clark for a party, he shows up in a white windowless van.
I'm not booking Clark for a party until he puts on some pants.
One of my favorite stories, but my year in Beloit with the Snappers was that. So we had like 3 or 4 people who were snappy that year. The adorable but sad sack turtle mascot was no longer a thing in Beloit. They are now the sky carp, which is terrible. It's a slang for goose, apparently.
Wow.
But we would occasionally, Snappy would get booked to go to like a birthday party or a corporate event or whatever. And so in Snappy orientation, they made a real point to tell the people who were going to be Snappy that you cannot be seen without the head. You know, if you get hot or whatever, do not just pop the head off on the concourse and get drink out of a drinking fountain because it's going to blow the illusion. Go into the office, get away from everybody, and then do it. So one of the guys had to go to I think it was a birthday party, and he gets back to the park, and the general manager comes over, and he goes, "How'd it go?" He said, "It was fine." He said, "Well, we got a complaint. You were 20 minutes late." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you know how hard it is to drive with this thing on?" He drove to the thing with the head on because he thought if somebody saw him in the car without the head, he was going to get in trouble. So he was literally driving. You know, you can only see through. It's like the nose of Snappy is where the thing was. He was driving a car looking through the screen on the front of the mascot head. And they're like, "Oh, I guess we got to rewrite the talking points for orientation. You are allowed to not wear the head while you're driving.
Just park around the corner so no one sees you."
Yeah. So great moments in mascot history.
I like my year in Beloit as a title for a memoir. So just think about
I got plenty of stories. I've told them all on one or another podcast, but I don't know if I ever told the mascot one. That was fun.
I liked it.
I did. Snappy really smelled by mid-season. Just awful. And we had a doubleheader. Thankfully, in the Midwest League, doubleheader 7 innings. Like they were in baseball for one year, which was actually kind of fun. But we went back in the office, and the girl who was Snappy that day was sitting just soaked in sweat. And the little Snappy head was at her feet. And she was drinking Gatorade, and it was still hot. And they're like, "Are you ready to go back out?" And she's like, "Yeah." She goes, "But I really don't want to put this thing back on." And like, "Why does it stink?" She's like, "Yeah, but listen." And when she put the head on, we could all hear it squish because there was so much like water in it. Yeah. And they're like, "Maybe we should get that dry cleaned." Like, yeah, maybe you should.
Worse smell than hockey pads?
I don't know about hockey pads. I know from playing high school football that we used to keep all of our equipment on the stage in the, because the theater nerds, well, in a little farm town, there's not a lot of theater nerds, but that's where we hung all the racks were there for our stuff. And that whole thing would that smell is unmatched from the equipment hanging there too. Eesh. I think that was the same night though, because we have how much the suit was reeking. The guy who sat in the press box with me, we were watching. It was great. So little kids would Snappy would come around. Little kids would get all excited, and then the parent would decide to take a picture of the little kid with Snappy. And it happened like 4 or 5 times where Snappy put her arm around the little kid, and the kid immediately got a whiff of Snappy, and the picture was of them like looking up like, ugh. It smells like a turtle. What do you expect?
Right.
All right. Well, this was fun, and I'm sure we'll come up with more crap to talk about in a couple of weeks.
All right. Sounds good, Andy.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay.
Many of us have herpes.
No, I thought it generally sucked. I didn't think it was a specific suck. I thought it was like an all-encompassing type of suck. So, we're going to try and rectify that. But for right now, I'm going to be pretty pissed about it.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. Got to congratulate the Dolan family.